The sun was low over the red hills. Dust moved across the empty ground like slow waves. Captain Daniel Hayes sat outside his small shelter, repairing an old cooking pot. It had been 2 years since the war. 2 years since he had left the crowded human colonies and chosen this lonely place near the old trade route. He liked the silence. He liked being far from other people. The only sounds were the wind and the quiet hum of the power unit. But this evening, there was something else. Hey? Shape in the distance, moving slowly along the ridge. Daniel squinted against the sunlight. At first, he thought it was a trader. But then he saw there were 3 figures, 1 tall, 2 small. They walked unsteady, as if they had been on the road for a long time. As they came closer, Daniel saw the truth. The tall figure was an alien woman. Her skin was pale silver, and her large, dark eyes seemed to hold a heavy sadness. Her clothes were torn, the fabric worn thin by travel. She carried a small bundle on her back. The 2 children stayed close to her legs. Holding onto her hands, they were thin, their faces tired and dirty from the road. Daniel stood up slowly. He did not trust strangers, especially out here. The woman stopped a few meters from the camp. She looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to judge if he was safe. Then she spoke in a soft, careful voice. "You are human," she said, almost like a question. Daniel nodded. "That's right." Her voice trembled. "Please. We need help." Daniel looked past her to the empty horizon. "What happened to you?" he asked. She lowered her head. "Raiders," she said. "They came to my village. They killed my husband." She touched the shoulders of her children. "We ran before they could take us." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had seen enough war to know the truth in her eyes. But then she said something that made him pause. "Human. Will you take me as your mate?" The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. Daniel stared at her, not sure he had heard correctly. "You mean, marry you?" he asked. She nodded, her hands shaking. "If you take me, they cannot touch me." Daniel felt a wave of confusion. He had never met her before. She was an alien, someone from a species he barely knew. Why would she ask this? "Why me?" he asked, his voice firm. "Because," she whispered, "humans are feared in this sector. Your kind are known as protectors, fighters. If I am your wife, even the collectors will leave me alone." The children's eyes darted to the horizon. Daniel noticed their fear. "What are you running from?" he asked. "The collectors," she said, her voice breaking. "They take widows. They take orphans. They sell them, use them." She looked straight at him. "Please, if you send us away, they will find us. They will take us." Daniel crossed his arms. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said. But even as he spoke, the wind carried a faint sound, a low, deep hum. It was coming from the distance. Surah, the woman, turned sharply. "They're coming," she whispered. Her hands gripped her children tighter. Daniel's eyes searched the horizon, and then he saw it. Faint lights, moving like stars close to the ground. Slow at first, then faster. The hum grew louder, turning into a thudding sound. Metal footsteps. The kind Daniel remembered from the war machines. Built for hunting. The collectors. Sarah stepped forward. Desperation in her eyes. "If you say, 'I am your wife,' they cannot take me." Daniel didn't answer right away. His mind raced. He had chosen a quiet life, far from conflict. But now trouble had walked straight into his camp. The children looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. The sound of the footsteps grew nearer. Dust rose in small clouds from the horizon. Daniel took a deep breath. He could send them away and avoid the danger, or he could protect them and invite trouble into his life again. But he knew what would happen if he let them go. He had seen it before. During the war, he sighed. "Stay behind me," he said. At last, Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "Does this mean it means I'll handle it?" Daniel said. The thudding footsteps were close now. Dark shapes appeared between the hills. Tall figures of metal and armor, moving in perfect rhythm. The setting sun caught the glint of their weapons. Daniel's hand moved to the sidearm at his belt. His heartbeat was steady. He had not wanted this fight. But if it was coming, he would meet it head-on. Sira whispered something in her own language. A soft prayer. The children clung to her legs. The collectors spread out. Forming a half-circle around the camp, one of them stepped forward, scanning Daniel with a red beam of light. Daniel's voice was calm but cold. "They are under my protection," he said. The leader tilted his head, the mechanical voice buzzing, human. "You should not get involved." Daniel didn't move. "I'm already involved," he replied. The leader's visor flickered. Then he turned and gave a signal to the others. Slowly, the collectors stepped back, but before leaving, the leader said one thing that chilled the air. "This is not over." The machines vanished into the horizon. The hum faded, leaving only the wind. Sira looked at Daniel with something between relief and fear. "You just made an enemy you cannot see," she whispered. The fire in Daniel's small camp cracked softly. Night had fallen, and the stars of the alien sky burned cold and bright above. Sira sat close to the flames, her children curled up beside her. Sleeping under a thin blanket, Daniel sat across from her, sharpening a knife with slow, steady movements. The sound of the collector's footsteps still echoed in his mind. "They won't stop," Sira said quietly, breaking the silence. Daniel glanced up. "You know them well." She nodded. "They serve the Trade Council, but they also sell for themselves." To the highest bidder, her voice was bitter. "To them, my people are not people. Only labor, only property." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "And thereafter, you specifically." "Yes," she replied, "because I ran. Because I made them lose something they think belongs to them." Daniel leaned back, studying her face in the flickering light. "You said before, if I take you as my wife, they'll leave you alone." Sira met his gaze, her hands tightening on the blanket. "It's the law in my world. Bonded mates cannot be touched, not without starting a blood feud." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And nobody wants a blood feud with a human." Daniel gave a dry, humorless laugh. "I've had people start worse." Sira's eyes softened for a moment, but her tone stayed firm. "You are my only chance." Daniel shook his head slowly. "You're asking me to step into a fight?" "That's not mine. It will be," Sira said sharply, leaning forward. "If they take me, they will kill you next." Just for standing in their way tonight, the night air grew colder. The fire snapped, throwing sparks into the darkness. Daniel looked at the sleeping children. One had his arm thrown across his sister, as if guarding her even in dreams. He remembered being a soldier on human colony worlds, seeing children orphaned in the middle of war. He had told himself he was done with that life. But here it was, staring back at him. "You said they'd come back," Daniel said at last. Sira nodded. "They never forget, and they never forgive." Daniel rubbed a hand over his face. "So, what's your plan if I say no?" Sira's voice cracked. "There is no plan." For a long time, neither spoke. Only the wind moved, carrying the smell of dust and the faint metallic taste of the collector's machines still lingering in the air. Then, far off, came a sound soft but out of place. Daniel's head turned sharply. It was a low, pulsing hum, different from the heavy steps of before. Sira's eyes went wide. "That's a scout," she whispered. "They're marking our location." Daniel stood quickly. Moving to the edge of the camp, a faint red light swept across the hills, then vanished. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. "They're keeping watch," he muttered. "They'll come at dawn," Sira said. Her voice was steady now, almost resigned. Daniel came back to the fire, his mind already running through old habits. Check weapons, check escape routes, he hated. How natural it felt. "You said if we were bonded, They couldn't touch you. He said slowly. Sierra nodded once. Yes, and that law. Does it work both ways? Her brow furrowed. Both ways. I mean, Daniel continued, if I claim you, does it also protect me from them? Sierra thought for a moment. Then her eyes lit with realization. Yes, they couldn't harm. A bonded mate without breaking the code. Daniel sat down, staring into the flames. He hated the thought of getting tangled in alien customs, but he hated the thought of those machines dragging the woman and her children away more. You understand what you're asking, he said finally. Yes, Sierra said without hesitation. I understand. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of the fire. The children stirred in their sleep, one murmuring softly in their alien tongue. Sierra reached to smooth her daughter's hair. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was calm when she spoke again. Daniel Hayes, will you take me as your mate? The question hung in the cold night air. Daniel exhaled slowly. His eyes met hers, and for a moment he saw past the alien face to the raw human fear beneath. Finally, he nodded once. All right, he said. But if we're doing this, we do it my way. Sierra's shoulders sagged with relief. What is your way? She asked. Daniel's voice was low and firm. We move before dawn. We find some place the collectors can't track us easily. And if they follow, we end it before it begins. Sierra's expression shifted relief mixed with something else. A flicker of respect. You fight like the stories say humans do, she murmured. Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he stood and began packing his gear. He checked his rifle, replaced the power cell, and strapped on the sidearm. Every motion was calm. But inside his chest, the old soldier in him was waking up. Far out in the darkness, something moved, not footsteps. Not the hum of a scout. Something heavier, slower. Daniel paused, listening. The sound faded, but the unease stayed. He looked at Sarah. They're not the only ones out there, he said. Sarah's eyes flicked toward the hills. Then we must go before the night ends, she said. Daniel nodded. The fire burned low, shadows stretching long across the dusty ground. Above them, the stars seemed sharper, colder. And somewhere in the dark, unseen eyes were watching. The first pale light of dawn touched the red hills. The air was cold and dry, carrying the faint metallic scent Daniel had learned to recognize. He was awake long before the sun rose, packing supplies into a small travel pack. Sierra was already up, quietly waking her children and giving them a sip of water from a dented flask. Daniel moved with quiet speed, checking the rifle one last time. He listened carefully. No birds, no wind, just a strange stillness. That stillness was a warning. He had felt it before, on battlefields, just before the enemy made their move. We leave now, Daniel said. Sierra nodded without argument. She lifted her youngest child onto her hip, holding the other by the hand. They had just started moving toward the back trail when Daniel froze. A sound rolled over the hills. A slow, deep thudding. Not one machine, but many. Moving in perfect rhythm, they've come sooner, Sierra whispered, fear sharpening her voice. Daniel turned to scan the horizon. Dark shapes emerged between the ridges. Sunlight glinting off metal armor, collector's tall. Insect-like frames covered in dull black plating, each carrying a long spear riffle. Their heads were smooth domes with glowing red eyes. Unblinking, they moved in a half circle, surrounding the camp from three sides. Stay behind me, Daniel said, voice low but firm. Sierra obeyed, pulling the children close. The lead collector stepped forward. Its voice buzzed through a voice box translator. Human. Release the fugitives, and you may walk away alive. Daniel didn't flinch. They are under my protection. He said, protection is irrelevant. The collector replied, they are property. Marked for retrieval, Daniel's jaw tightened. You take them, you'll have to take me too. The collector's head tilted. Your life has no value to us. Yet Daniel raised his rifle slightly. I suggest you keep it that way, he said. The machine shifted, metal joints clicking. For a moment, Daniel thought they would attack, but instead, the leader raised a clawed hand, signaling the others. To hold the voice box buzzed again. Human bonding law does not apply without proof. It said. Daniel's mind raced proof. Sierra stepped forward suddenly, her voice clear. We have bonded, she declared. Her words were strong, though her hands trembled. Under my people's law, we are bound for life. The leader paused. Collectors valued order and their codes. We're old. Breaking them could cause trouble with alien factions they preferred not to fight. Still, it leaned closer to Daniel. Red eyes burning. This will be reported, it said. You have made a dangerous claim. Daniel held its gaze. You came into my camp. You threatened my family. He spoke the last word deliberately. Leave, or find out why humans are feared. A long silence followed. Then the collector turned sharply and gave the retreat signal. One by one, the machines stepped back. The thudding footsteps fading into the hills, but the leader lingered. A moment longer, it spoke in a quieter tone. Almost for Daniel alone, we do not forget. When they were gone, Sierra let out a shaking breath. You risked yourself, she said. Daniel glanced at her. We're in this together now. They wasted no time. Daniel led them toward the narrow back trail that wound into the canyon. Here, the rocks rose high on both sides, making it harder. For flying scouts to spot them, the ground was uneven, and the children stumbled, but they kept moving. Daniel's instincts screamed that they were not safe yet, halfway through the canyon. Sierra slowed. You understand? She said. They will follow us. Always, Daniel nodded. Then we make it too costly for them. Sierra gave him a curious look. Costly. Daniel's eyes were cold. Collectors hunt because it's easy. I'll make it hard. They reached a rocky ledge where the canyon narrowed into a single pass. Daniel stopped and scanned the ground. This was a good choke point. If the collectors came after them now, they could only approach one at a time. He motioned for Sierra and the children to move ahead and wait. As he checked the rocks above, something caught his eye glint. Not sunlight, but glass, a lens. His stomach tightened. Someone was watching them from the cliff. Before he could speak, a shadow moved across the ledge above. Not a collector. This figure was smaller, wrapped in desert cloth, carrying an old slug rifle. It crouched low, studying them. Daniel recognized the stance, not a scout, but a tracker. Human, or close enough. The figure slipped away silently. Daniel knew what that meant. There were more players in this game than just the collectors. When he caught up with Sierra, she noticed his expression. What is it? She asked. Daniel didn't slow his pace. Your collectors aren't the only ones hunting us, he said. Sierra's grip on her children tightened. Her voice was low. Then who? Daniel's eyes stayed on the twisting trail ahead. That, he said, is what I plan to find out, before they find us. The sun had slipped behind the hills. The desert world turned cold fast, the warmth vanishing as if someone had pulled it away. Daniel found a shallow cave in the canyon wall, just big enough to hide them for the night. He built a small, smokeless fire, careful to keep its light low. Sierra sat close with her children. Wrapping them in a thin blanket, the little ones ate the last of the dried fruit Daniel had. Chewing slowly, their eyes kept drifting to the cave mouth, as if they expected shadows to walk in. Daniel noticed, but didn't comment. Fear could keep them alert, but it could also break them if it grew too strong. After the children had fallen asleep, Daniel sat across from Sarah. The firelight flickered over her pale silver skin. She stared into the flames as if they could answer questions. Finally, Daniel spoke. You said the collectors took your husband, her head turned sharply. I said they killed him, she corrected, her voice tight. They only take the living. And he refused to kneel. Her words carried no tears, only a steady edge. Daniel had heard that tone before in soldiers who had seen too much. You fought too? He asked. A small smile touched her lips, but it was bitter. Yes. But I am not like you, human, my kind. We are taught to obey. Daniel shook his head. From where I'm sitting, you don't sound very obedient. Her smile faded. I ran, she said simply. That is not bravery. It is survival. The cave filled with quiet for a moment. Outside, the wind moved softly through the canyon. Then Sierra said, "There is something you should know." Daniel waited. She took a breath. The collectors are not acting alone. They are working for someone who wants more than just slaves. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Who? She hesitated, then whispered a name in her language. It was sharp, full of hard consonants. Daniel didn't know the meaning, but the way she said it made his skin prickle. He is not of my kind, she continued. Not of yours either. But he deals in fear, and humans interest him. Daniel leaned forward. Interest him how? Sierra's voice dropped to almost nothing. He pays to have humans taken alive. The fire popped softly. Daniel felt a cold knot in his chest. That's why the collector leader mentioned a bounty, he muttered. Yes, Sierra said, they wanted me. But they wanted you more. Daniel looked toward the cave entrance. The shadows beyond seemed thicker now. So, the man I saw on the cliff was not with the collectors, Sierra finished for him. He was with the bounty hunters. Eh? Long silence stretched between them. Finally, Daniel spoke. You could have told me sooner. Sierra's gaze didn't waver. If I had, would you still have helped me? Daniel didn't answer right away. He thought of the children sleeping only a few steps away. He thought of the cold red eyes of the collectors and the unknown figure watching them from above. Yes, he said at last. But I'd have been better prepared. Sierra nodded slightly. You humans. You always prepare for war. Daniel gave a small shrug. It's the only reason I'm still alive. The wind shifted outside, carrying a faint sound, a scrape of rock. Too light for the machines, too close for comfort. Daniel motioned. For silence, he moved to the cave mouth, crouching low in the faint starlight. He saw a shadow moving along the canyon wall. Not a collector too quick, too careful, the same figure from earlier. Wrapped in desert cloth, Daniel raised his rifle. The figure froze, then slowly lifted one hand, palm open, no weapon visible. A voice called softly, "Human. I can help you." Daniel didn't lower his weapon. Step into the light, he ordered. The figure obeyed, revealing a narrow face, part human, part something else sized too wide, skin with a faint bronze shimmer. I am not your enemy, the stranger said. Then what are you? Daniel asked. A survivor. Like you, the stranger replied, but if you stay here, you won't be for long. Sierra had stepped up beside Daniel, her expression tightening when she saw the stranger. You, she hissed. You work for him? The stranger didn't flinch. I worked for him, they said. Now I am running too. Daniel kept the rifle steady. Why should I believe you? The stranger's eyes met his, because I know where you can hide. And where you can strike back. Those last words caught Daniel's attention. He glanced at Sierra. Her expression was uncertain, but there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. The stranger stepped closer, their voice low. The collectors are not the worst thing chasing you, human. But you already know that. Daniel thought of the name Sierra had whispered. The bounty on humans, the invisible network pulling the strings. Talk, he said finally, and don't lie. The stranger nodded. Not here. Too many ears. In the dark, they pointed deeper into the canyon. There is an old tunnel from the war. No machines can track you inside. If you live long enough to reach it, Daniel felt the weight of the choice before him, trusting this stranger could be a trap, but staying here meant certain death. He looked at Sira, then at the sleeping children. "We move before the moon sets," he said. The moon hung low. Its pale light turned the canyon wall silver. Daniel led the way, rifle ready, eyes scanning every shadow behind him. Sira carried her youngest child while the older one walked close beside her. The stranger, in desert cloth, moved silently at the rear, checking the trail for signs of pursuit. They had been walking for hours. The canyon floor twisted like a maze. Sometimes the walls closed in so tight Daniel could touch both sides with his hands. Other times it opened into wide, flat ground where they felt exposed. Every sound seemed louder in the still night stones crunching under boots, the faint rustle of cloth, the quick breathing of the children. "Tell me about this tunnel," Daniel said quietly to the stranger. "It was built during your war," the stranger replied. "Humans used it to move weapons past enemy lines. Now it is forgotten." Daniel's jaw tightened. Forgotten tunnels usually have a reason they're forgotten. The stranger gave a small shrug. "Better the dangers you don't know than the hunters you do." Sira's voice came soft, but firm from behind. "Why help us?" The stranger didn't answer at first. When they finally spoke, their tone was dry. "Because I am tired of serving masters who see people as tools." Daniel glanced back. "You mean him, the stranger?" Nodded once. "Yes." Him, the name Sira had whispered, still echoed in Daniel's head. He didn't like mysteries. Mysteries got people killed. But tonight was about survival. Questions could wait, bullets could not. They moved until the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky. The stranger raised a hand for them to stop. "We rest here," they said. Daniel frowned. Open ground isn't rest. The stranger pointed to a jagged rock formation ahead. Inside was a hollow space just large enough to crawl into. Not comfortable, but hidden. Daniel went in first, checking for snakes, or worse. The air inside was stale, but it would do. They settled in, and for the first time since leaving the cave, the children's eyes began to close. Sira sat with her back to the wall, her gaze on the narrow entrance. Daniel sat opposite her, rifle across his knees. For a while, there was silence. Only the faint wind outside and the quiet breaths of the sleeping children. Then Sira asked softly, "Why did you leave your people, Daniel Hayes?" He looked at her for a moment before answering. "Because sometimes your own people can do more damage than the enemy." Her brow furrowed. "You mean your war?" Daniel nodded. "I followed orders, and good people died for nothing. When it ended, I walked away." Sira's eyes searched his face. "Yet, here you are again." Daniel's mouth twitched in a humorless smile. "Life's funny like that." They rested only a short time before moving again. By mid-morning, the ground began to rise. The canyon walls grew taller, and the air turned cooler. The stranger stopped at a narrow crack in the rock, barely wide enough for a person to slip. "Through this way," they said. Inside, the light faded fast. The crack led to a sloping tunnel that spiraled downward. The walls were rough stone, damp to the touch. Daniel kept one hand on the wall and the other on his rifle. The children clung to Sira as they moved deeper. The smell of the place was old and dusty, but there was something else, a faint, metallic tang that made Daniel uneasy. They came to a wider chamber lit by a single beam of light from a crack in the ceiling. The floor was scattered with old supply crates, their markings faded. "This is it," the stranger said. "Rest here for a while. No machine can track you in these walls." Daniel set his pack down, but he didn't relax. He walked the perimeter, checking for other exits. One narrow passage sloped even further down, disappearing into darkness. When he returned, Syrah was giving the children small pieces of bread from her bag. The stranger sat against the wall, silent, watching. For a short time, it almost felt safe. But Daniel knew better than to believe in safe for long. And he was right. A faint, distant noise drifted through the tunnel. Not the heavy steps of collectors, something lighter, quicker, boots. The stranger's head snapped up. "They found us," they said. Syrah's eyes widened. Daniel grabbed his rifle. "How?" The stranger's jaw tightened. "Not the collectors. Bounty hunters." The sound grew louder. Shadows flickered at the far end of the tunnel. Daniel moved to the entrance, taking cover behind a crate. Syrah pulled the children back into the darker part of the chamber. The stranger crouched low, pulling a curved blade from under their cloak when the first hunter appeared. Daniel saw they were heavily armed light armor, visors, short carbines. 3 came in fast. Moving like they knew the ground, Daniel fired once, dropping the first. The tunnel exploded with echoes, the sharp smell of burned air filling the space. The other 2 dived for cover, returning fire. Stone chips rained from the walls. The stranger moved like flowing water, slipping around the crates. They slashed one hunter's leg, pulling them down. Daniel finished the job with a single shot. The last bounty hunter hesitated. Their visor turned toward Syrah and the children. Daniel's heart dropped before they could move. Syrah stepped forward. Her voice rose, sharp and commanding. "Leave." She shouted in her own tongue. The sound echoed off the walls like a blade striking metal. The hunter froze, something in her voice making them falter. That moment was all Daniel needed. One shot. And the tunnel was silent again. Daniel lowered his rifle slowly. Syrah's chest rose and fell quickly. "You fight," he said quietly. Her eyes flicked to his. "When I have no choice." The tunnel was quiet again. Only the smell of burned air and the faint drip of water from the ceiling remained. Daniel checked the hunters' bodies quickly. No insignia, no identification, only weapons built for speed. Bounty hunters liked to leave no trace. That meant someone very powerful was paying them to stay invisible. "We cannot stay here," the stranger said, their voice tight. "They will send more, and they will not make the same mistakes." Daniel agreed. He had seen this pattern before in human wars when scouts failed. The real force came next. Syrah was comforting her children. They clung to her, eyes wide and glassy. Daniel walked over. "They're all right for now," he said quietly. Her gaze rose to meet his. "For now is not enough," she replied. Daniel nodded once. "Then we stop running." The stranger frowned. "You can't fight them, Hedden. Human." Daniel gave a dry smile. "I don't fight, Hedden. I fight smart." He explained his plan quickly. The tunnel had a narrow bend before it opened to the chamber. If they forced the enemy into that choke point, they could take them down one by one. The stranger would plant charges along the side, walls to collapse the rock if needed. Syrah would keep the children hidden in the deeper chamber, far from the fighting. Syrah didn't like the idea of being away from Daniel during the fight. "You will be outnumbered," she said. Daniel glanced at her. "I've been outnumbered since the day I was born," he said simply. They prepared fast. Daniel moved the supply crates into cover positions. The stranger set the charges, thin strips of metal with blinking green lights. Syrah gave Daniel a short, sharp, dagger-alien make. The blade curved in black. "You might need this," she said. Daniel accepted it with a small nod. It wasn't his style, but he wasn't turning down any weapon tonight. By the time they were ready, the faint hum of machines was already reaching them. Not the heavy pounding of collectors, but the lighter step of bounty hunters, many more than before. Daniel's heartbeat stayed steady. War had taught him how to breathe when death was close. The first shadows appeared in the bend. Daniel fired one shot. One down, the echo of the blast rolled. Down the tunnel, 2 more hunters rushed forward. But the stranger's blade flashed in the dim light. One dropped with a cut to the throat. The other staggered from a wound in the side before Daniel finished them. The enemy didn't retreat. They kept coming. They were disciplined, moving in pairs. Daniel ducked back behind a crate as a burst of fire chewed into the stone near his. Head shards of rock stung his face, but he didn't blink. The stranger pulled a small device from their belt. They're grouping for a push. They said, "Good," Daniel replied. He waited until the hunters began to bunch up at the choke point. Then gave the signal. The stranger hit the detonator. The side wall blew inward. Rock and dust swallowing 3 hunters at once. The rest hesitated. That was their mistake. Daniel rose from cover and moved forward. Firing with calm precision, he didn't waste shots. Every pull of the trigger found a target. By the time the smoke cleared, only 2 hunters remained. They dropped their weapons and backed away into the darkness. Daniel didn't chase. He knew. They would be back with more. The stranger's face was grim. "You fight like someone who has been hunted before," they said. Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he turned to check on Sira and the children. They were safe. But Sira's expression told him she understood something. "You cannot keep doing this," she said softly. Daniel met her eyes. "If I stop, we all die." The stranger stepped closer. "There's a way to end this, but it's not safe." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Safe is off the table." The stranger hesitated. "You go after him directly. No running, no hiding." Sira's breath caught. "You mean the one who sends them?" The stranger nodded. "He has a base in the deep sands, guarded by machines and hunters. But if he falls, the collectors lose their orders." Daniel's eyes were hard. "How far?" 2 days' march, the stranger said. "If you live that long for a moment." No one spoke. The air in the tunnel felt heavy. Finally, Daniel said, "Then we leave at first light." Sira stepped closer. "If you go, I go," she said. Firmly, Daniel shook his head. "This isn't your fight." Her gaze didn't waver. "It became my fight the day they killed my husband. And the day you stood in front of me." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he gave a small nod. "Then we finish this together." The desert stretched out before them. 2 days of empty horizon. No shade, no water. Only the slow crawl of heat in the day and freezing winds at night. Daniel walked at the front, rifle in hand, scanning the distance for movement behind him. Sira held her youngest close while the older child kept pace beside her. The stranger followed at the rear, eyes sweeping their trail to be sure nothing stalked them. They moved fast, stopping only to drink small sips of water and rest in the rare patches of shadow between jagged rocks. The sun burned the ground until it shimmered. Daniel felt the heat crawling into his armor, but he ignored it. His mind was locked on one thing the man Sira had named. The one who paid for humans to be taken alive by the second night. They saw it, far in the distance, lit by pale moons, a black tower rising out of the sand like a knife. Around it, faint moving shapes patrols, drones, machines. The stranger crouched beside a boulder and pointed. "That is his base," they said. "No one walks in and lives." Daniel studied the layout. The tower's lower walls were ringed with defenses. But there was a service tunnel half buried under the sand. "How do you know it's still there?" Daniel asked. The stranger smirked faintly. "Because I built it that night." They waited until the moon slid behind clouds. Then they moved low, quiet, each step sinking into the cool sand. Sira kept the children hidden in a small hollow of rock. "I will come for you," Daniel told her. Her eyes held no fear now, only determination. "If you don't," she said, "I will come for you." The service tunnel's entrance was half collapsed. Daniel and the stranger crawled through, the air thick with dust and the smell of old oil. The narrow path twisted upward until they reached a grate that opened into a dark hallway. No guards here, just the quiet hum of the tower's power systems. They moved like shadows, past rooms filled with weapon racks, past corridors where the walls were lined with metal cages. Some were empty, some were not. Faces looked out at Daniel, human faces. Thin and bruised, he felt something deep in his chest tighten. The stranger whispered, "If we open them now, the alarm will bring the whole garrison." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Then we'd do it on the way out." They reached the lift at the tower's core. Only one place, it went straight to the top when the doors opened. The room they stepped into was wide and dim. At the far end stood a tall figure in black armor, his face hidden behind a mask of gold. "I wondered when you'd come." The voice was deep, smooth. "You've been costing me credits, human." Daniel's grip tightened on his rifle. "Then you should have stayed out of my camp." The masked man chuckled. "You think this is about a widow and her brats? No. You are a resource, Daniel Hayes. Humans are rare here, and some would pay very well for your kind." "You'll be disappointed," Daniel said coldly. "I'm not for sale." The man's head tilted slightly. "Everything is for sale. If the price is right." He lifted one hand and gave a signal from the shadows. Two large collectors stepped forward, their armor darker than any Daniel had seen. Their eyes burned red in the gloom. The fight was fast and brutal. Daniel dropped one collector with a shot to the joint at its neck, sparks exploding in the dark. The other charged, slamming him into the wall. The rifle fell from his hands. The stranger lunged in, blade flashing, cutting through the collector's side until it fell with a crash. Daniel was already moving. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed the masked man, and slammed him against the wall. "Call them off." Daniel growled. "There's no one left to call." The man replied with a mocking laugh. Daniel's fist drove into his chest hard enough to crack the armor. The laugh stopped, replaced by a choking gasp. Daniel pulled him close, voice low. "You touch her, you touch those kids, and I'll make sure you never breathe again." The man tried to speak, but Daniel shoved him aside. The stranger's voice cut in. "Urgent. We have 2 Gamor are coming." On the way out, Daniel kept his promise. He smashed open the cages, pulling the humans and other captives into the hallway. They moved as one, a wave of desperate people following them down the lift, through the tunnel and out into the cold desert night. When they reached the rocks where Sira waited, the children ran to Daniel without hesitation. She looked at him, scanning for wounds. "You came back," she said simply. "Always," he replied, by the time the sun rose. The tower was a dark column of smoke on the horizon. Daniel, Sira, the children, and the freed captives walked toward the mountains. The stranger parted ways without a word, disappearing into the sands as they climbed the first rocky slope. The children stayed close to Daniel. One small voice spoke. "Are we safe now?" Daniel didn't promise. Instead, he said, "We're together now. And that's enough to fight for." Sira looked at him, her eyes calm but strong. "This world takes so much," she said, "but sometimes it gives back." They kept walking, and somewhere ahead, beyond the mountains, a new life waited, one not given, but built, step by step, together.